I'm trying to get us our heads to match up. Oh, we are live, or we're almost live. So, hi, everybody. I am Carol Kauffman, the founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David, and more recently, a senior leadership advisor at Egon Zender. And I am here with Joy Howard, and we are in for a treat. So, Joy started out her professional career as a rock star, literally, not figuratively. In fact, if you want to see a very kind of tough picture of her, go to my website at some point, carolkaufman.com, go way to the bottom, and you'll see her with her band. But she then graduated into marketing, was the head of marketing at Patagonia, then became a CMO at Sonos. You guys know that's like speakers and stuff. And then Lyft, and then Dashlane, sort of security. And so what's interesting is she has this combo of like really cool retail and technology, which has led her to where she is today. So Joy, I want to just describe what you're doing now, and then we'll go back in time.
Sure. So I have actually just last year, so very recently, actually we just hit, I think 12 months as a company, started my own company. I have founded a company called Early Majority, and we started as a Substack newsletter and began building a brand community around that newsletter. And in the process, also have developed a line of technical streetwear that meets the needs and standards of women, which we'll be launching in the spring. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm the founder and CEO of this new company.
Tell us more about what tech streetwear is.
Yeah, so basically, we call it technical streetwear. It's for the outdoors. So it's more of an outdoor gear company. And part of what it means to meet the needs and standards of women is actually working throughout a variety of use cases, right? So from bike to boardroom to backcountry to bar, wherever you want to go, you want a very simple technical kit that works through all those eventualities. So that's what we mean by technical gear. And traditionally, women have been overlooked by the outdoor industry, been very much an afterthought in product development. So we're really starting from the perspective of women and developing product that meets the needs and standards of women primarily. It's a unisex product line, so everyone can wear it that wants to, but it's really different because it's developed from our perspective first.
Mm-hmm. So guys, one of the things I loved is I saw in, some early mock-ups of products and stuff, and there's literally one where you have one outfit on your bike or motorcycle, and then you just flip things around a little bit, and you can literally show up in the boardroom. It is very cool, very versatile. So Joy, here's what I was thinking we could start out with. So guys, what we're thinking of is a couple of things. One is to hear some of the inside story on what Joy did to really go from marketing to head of P&L, CEO, and what are some of the ways she progressed with that in a way for you to help your people, because it's not typical the CMO becomes the CEO. So Joy, when did you first start thinking, okay, I want to go beyond marketing and have my own company?
Well, actually, I started my career in business in an industry where marketing is the path to CEO. So I actually didn't start in marketing. I started in the finance division of Johnson & Johnson, actually in the business development division. So we were launching new businesses and new categories and looking at targets for acquisition. And I actually worked on a project that I was so passionate about. No one could say no to it. No one could say yes to it. It kept getting kicked up the flagpole until eventually, I was presenting it to the CEO, and we didn't get the product funded. And it was actually that experience where I looked at the CEO of J&J and I thought, wow, I want to have a positive impact on the lives of others. This person has the most significant positive impact within the company because he's making the decisions about how to allocate capital. How did he get there? How can I get there? And that, when you ask that question at a consumer packaged goods company like Johnson & Johnson, the answer is through marketing. Like, that's the path to CEO. So that's why I went into marketing to begin with, was basically to kind of get into a position where I could have as much impact as possible. And along that journey, I discovered, wow, I'm really good at marketing. And then I started having a lot of fun at marketing. And the next thing I knew, I was just really having a good time as a CMO. And it's different within technology, that within tech companies, there's usually a more technical path to CEO, because a lot of times tech companies are founded by engineers and very technical people. So it was a little bit of a surprise to me. I loved working in tech, but I hadn't really expected that would kind of like take me off the path to CEO in some ways, which obviously it didn't entirely, but it became a less conventional path at that point.
Mm-hmm. So when you were thinking about that, what's your advice to basically making that transition? Because I know from early on, so you began actually in finance, which is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
But what advice would you give CMOs and also the people in our group that are coaching CMOs? Like how would you help them go there if that's what they want?
Yeah, I think part of it is actually to know yourself really well and what you're really good at, and sort of, pick an industry where what you're actually good at is going to be critical to your success within that industry. So, I've been so lucky to just get such extraordinary advice, and I never actually would have occurred to me to start my own business. But part of why I did was I worked with this really incredible board at Sonos, and it was actually several people on the board that reached out to me and said, "Have you ever thought about starting your own company?" Which I had never thought about doing before. And one of them, was actually very clear and said, "Look, if you want to be the CEO, the best way to do it is actually start your own company, because the kind of CEO roles that are going to come across your plate are either going to be for companies where they're really operationally screwed up, or they're very strategically screwed up. And it's going to be one of those two reasons that they're going to be looking for a new CEO. And what you really want is a company that's operationally screwed up. But for me personally, I really like a strategic challenge more than an operational challenge. And so that's why it made so much sense for me to pursue this path on my own. So I think the biggest advice is like, make sure that you're working in an industry where what you do really well is critical to the success of the company. That's probably the first thing. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is to just really have, an ownership mindset. So to just really think as an owner and learn as much about all the different functional aspects of a business as you can, which is really what you need to do, what you would want to do naturally as an owner of a business. So I think that ownership mindset is also really important. And I think the third thing is like, not be intimidated by the things that you're not necessarily good at. Like I feel like I've known CMOs that would make great CEOs, but they were in some ways intimidated by their lack of financial acumen or their lack of facility with numbers. And everybody has strong suits and weak suits. And the art is actually complementing your weak suits with people who are really great at it, and knowing just enough like not to be intimidated by it.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. What you're saying reminds me of an article that Deb Ancona wrote for HBR years and years ago called "In Praise of the Incomplete Leader." And really, the idea that you can't be everything, but how can you kind of strategically bring people into your kind of top team so that together you're the brilliant brain. Why don't you tell us a little bit more? What we're going to shift to after this is also lessons you've learned from founders. But before that, just want to share a little bit more about things you learned in marketing and things you've heard from other people that would give our coaches just a couple more insights on, if you're coaching a CMO, what are some really good questions to ask them?
I think the most important, I think the highest leverage point as a CMO is to really take the responsibility, to really kind of rise to the occasion in terms of the growth of the company, and to really see marketing as not sort of like pixie dust that gets sprinkled on things at the end of the road, but as like very core to the growth logic of the company. Mm-hmm. And so, I would ask the CMO, do you feel like very well grounded in the strategy? Do you feel like you're playing a really important role in setting the vision of the company? You really understand, how the company is making money and what your role is in that. So just really kind of like getting in there, in the very, kind of core of what really makes the business tick. And if not, like what's holding you back? from that.
So here's another idea that fell into my head. So I remember years ago working with a CMO at a big Johnson and Johnson like company, and there was a whole thing about the magic and the logic in marketing. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because it's such an interesting position where you really have to develop both sides of your brain. And a lot of people think of marketing and creative. And what you're really pointing out is again really doing the magic and the logic. How did
Yeah.
you
So
learn to do that? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm just so lucky I was never trained to see those two things as separate. But
Yeah.
I have worked in companies where they are disconnected. And before I was at Patagonia, I was working as part of. I was at Converse, which is a part of Nike, and Nike had a really fantastic framework for marketers at the time, and it was sort of like brand intuition and brand science. And
Mm,
as your career progressed, you would look to master aspects of the brand that were more intuitive and creative, but then you would also look to really ground yourself in the science aspect of the brand, which is more the numbers and how the numbers all add up and how they change over time. And so that framework has been useful for me as I've tried to develop other marketers as well. Everyone will have a natural kind of pull. I mean, you will find marketers who are left brain and right brain, who have a really strong commercial sensibility and a great creative acumen, and that's really the holy grail. Like, to me, that's the making of a great general manager or CEO.
mm,
And I think there's nothing more thrilling than being able to see the creativity come through in the numbers. It's really like,
mm,
when you're close to it, it's just so gratifying and so energizing. And so always being able to kind of, I had a wonderful VP of marketing that said to me really early on, you're going to be fantastic if you learn to see through to the numbers, because I could see all the, the superficial and the soul aspect of things, but how
mm.
does that flow through to the numbers? And once I started to see that, I just was hooked, because I just found it so energizing and exciting. When the numbers went the wrong way, amazing. It's like really great learning too. And when they went the right way, obviously, like, really fun.
No, it's interesting. I'm thinking about one person I worked with who talked about, I want to let the data sing to me. So let the data sing. So another question fell into my head, which is sort of your role as a marketing leader, about what tips or thoughts do you have for people who are managing creatives? Because this is like, herding cats is more easy. What kind of advice or thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people shy away from giving constructive feedback to creative people because creative people feel what they do so intensively. Like, a lot of it is very feeling driven.
Mm,
And so if you're not practiced in giving feedback, you can really hurt someone's feelings and kind of, like, what makes a creative a great creative, and what makes a creative person really thrive, I think, in their role. Like, let's say you're the creative, Carol. Then what will make you, I think, really successful is if you believe that I have empowered your subjectivity. It's
mm,
right, really weird for business, right? Because business is all about, you think it's all about the numbers and about being objective, but creativity is about having your subjectivity empowered.
mm,
And when you think that I start to doubt your subjectivity, it's like kryptonite to you.
mm,
So I think I always keep that in mind of, like, I'm here to empower the subjectivity of the creative team. And when I give feedback, I almost always try to do it from a position of strategy. I'm not sure if this meets the
mm.
objective. Is there a different way to meet it? And stay out of the subjective realm and the sort of, like, art direction realm. And it's actually, people need to be trained, I think, in giving good feedback to creative teams. And unfortunately, a lot of marketers are not trained in that. And a lot of business people aren't either. They really underestimate how hard that work is, and
Mhm.
just how easy it is to mess it up.
Mm. What you're reminding me of is all the work in positive psychology. So this woman, I think this was really Barbara Fredrickson, who started talking about the power of positive emotion. And one of the things in particular is that positive emotion sort of increases your scope of what you see, and then negative emotion narrows it. So when you're saying to support the subjectivity, it's really supporting that person, saying, I believe in how you see things. And then as you make that person feel better, technically by activating their parasympathetic nervous system, there's all kinds of research that talks about how that brings out creativity. So anyway, thanks for that. Why don't we shift now to the things you've seen in coaching founders and what helped you made that transition?
So it has been just an incredible journey for me this last year. I feel like I've learned so much more in the last year, probably than I have in the last 3 or 4 by having this experience. And I have thought a lot about the successful founders that I've worked with. And I've also, talked to them about, okay, what made a difference for you in terms of your personal growth? And, I think one of the biggest things, like, one has to be somewhat stubborn because there's so many obstacles when you start a business. It's just a constant stream of obstacles. So the people who are successful or even have the nerve to do it have to be bold. They have to be stubborn. These are just part of the natural kind of skill sets, right? I mean, Yvon Chouinard is very quotable. And, he has a lot of quotes about, founders. And one of them is like, if you really want to understand the mind of a founder, you should study a juvenile delinquent. But it's like, a lack of respect for authority in a lot of ways, right? Like, I really believe I can do something better. Nobody else sees this thing that I see, and I'm determined to fix that thing, And so I think when you're coaching a founder, you've got to be a truth teller. Like, you've got to find a way to get through, because what makes someone so successful, which is almost that like obsessive focus on solving a problem or meeting a need, can also be problematic because it can blind you to your own blind spots, to the collateral damage that you create along the way. So I just think the most important thing is, like, it takes a lot sometimes to get through.
Yeah. The way I think of it is to be a founder, you kind of need to be a bit demented. As you're rolling this boulder up the hill and trying to get other people to push the rock.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it can fall down the hill and go back. So, so you've worked with some very famous founders. Do you have some particular insights on what was useful for them? And I'm assuming you can't really name a lot of names, but we would know a lot of the founders you've worked with. What do you think for those of us coaching founders, what do you think some of the watch outs are so that we help them on this journey forward?
Well, I can tell. Okay, so a couple of things. So one of the things that, to me, I observed, especially, so to me, a successful founder in some ways is it has created an environment where I was able to have a tremendous impact and where I really thrived. And so, because that's what I want to create, right? I want to create an environment where my team can really thrive, where they can do the best work that they've ever done. And so, I think, what I would say makes a founder really great is that they get hooked on that idea of, wow, I'm going to unleash the potential of this team, of these people. And I'm super energized by creating an environment where I see people flourish, where I can discover their talent, where I can, really challenge them, but also, really love and support them. And it's really interesting. Like, I had never seen that kind of servant leadership kind of mindset until I worked with the founder. And it really took me aback as an operator. I mean, it really called upon me to go far beyond, I've always been a hard worker and very ambitious and very driven. But once I got the sense that, wow, this person, their mission is to actually bring out the best in me, then I was really hooked and really wanted to do great work. And it's a lot of times, self-sacrifice. Like, I think, some founders are very introverted. And certainly, some of the things that I did together with Yvon, I definitely got the sense that for him it was work, like he would prefer to go fishing by himself, but it was so important to the rest of the company that I had that experience, that he would do it. So I would say, service, self-sacrifice, like how, kind of inculcating that sensibility versus privilege and entitlement, which is a real, just vibe killer for anyone, that's working for you. I think, I think it's easy to lose empathy with the team when you have so many challenges as a leader. And it's easy, I think, sometimes when the money is flowing to think, oh, it's all about me as the founder and what I've done. And, it's just really important to remember that it almost never is. It is obviously everything is your fault as a founder, which is very challenging. So I think that's also something to remember as a coach is like, ultimately the buck is going to stop with you. And, everything that's going wrong is some environment that you created or some decision that you made. But also everything can also go right if you realize that it's, in that respect, all about unlocking the people around you.
Yeah, you're making me think two things. One of them is you're really talking about people having two sets of strengths really, really built up that are usually seen as contradictory. Like the whole idea of like being demented. And one of our people listening, Peter DiCaprio, says, I tell my founders they are expected to be a bit demented. So on one hand, this demented determination, I will run through a 40-foot diamond wall, right? And on the other hand, to be this servant who's really trying to elicit that from other people and have others feel really supported and valued. So it's a really interesting and difficult combination, I think, to be able to experience and to be able to pull off. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, one time John McFarlane, the founder of Sonos, and he was someone who it was just so clear he was working hard on himself, and I think he just made a casual remark like, I've had to work really hard to be a good person. And I just found that it was a vulnerable thing to say, which of course he didn't care about because he was just had reached some plane, I think, beyond that. But it was also very reassuring in the sense that, okay, wow, all of us, are working to be better people. It's not like any of us were just, born suddenly always doing the right thing. And I found it very comforting and reassuring, that and also just like, yeah, I'm very driven by that too. I want to work on being a better person. I want to work on helping other people. And
yeah, you're reminding me. I have a fairly young founder that I just met for the first time last week. He came up here to Boston. Interesting because when I saw him in person, he was just like on Zoom. It was very interesting, but he talked about the experience of failure. Okay, so he's both adorable and brilliant. I feel like I'm talking to a phenomenon rather than a human when I'm talking to him because he is so smart. But one of the things he talks about is like the nature of failure and inspiration. So he had a great quote, which is, failure is the price you pay to learn, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And he said at one point he failed at something and said, I was so mad at myself, I didn't talk to myself for 2 days. That sort of says, so where does managing failure fit into this? And what have you seen people do right? And what have made you kind of cringe?
Honestly, like, I don't think I've seen, I think because I have worked for such successful founders, all of them had to deal with failure at some point, and they were all very good at doing that gracefully.
Yeah.
And, they all accepted a lot of accountability, and sometimes almost to a fault because, I think you want your team to trust you, right? So you never want to say, oh, so-and-so made me do this, or, I can't do this because of so-and-so. But the reality is, one is always managing competing demands, right? And so, and actually in a company that has good governance, one rarely is the sole decision maker. So I think being honest, with the team that, okay, look, you can trust me to be transparent with you about what's driving the decisions and why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. But I think what greatness looks like, just accepting accountability and modeling that versus, blaming. And part of accountability is also just acknowledging what your limitations are, right? Like if it's a decision that you can't make, it's not deflecting accountability to say, I'm being, nudged into this decision by these stakeholders. It's just reality. I mean, governance is about influencing the decisions that a CEO makes. Investors influence the decision that a CEO makes. They should never be the ones who force someone's hand, because then the team will lose all trust in the CEO and they'll think, well, gosh, I just need to be talking straight to the investors, or this person can't really lead me in the way that I need to be led because they don't have decision-making authority. So it's a subtle balance in that way. But I think when you're an operating executive, it is very hard to see the different pressures that a CEO has, the specialness of the relationship with investors. I think a lot of employees look at investors quite cynically. They don't investing period. They're not really carrying any risk. They're going to get their money back. And I think once you're in the position of raising money, you have a very different relationship with investors. You have a much more relationship of gratitude and mutuality, and really good investors are great coaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So backtracking a minute, one thing you were talking about, accountability, and a couple of quips on accountability. One of my clients once said, to have accountability, you need to have something to count. The other one about like the pointing fingers thing, or the blame, which is, so there's this coach in Germany, his name is Alf, and he was talking about this great metaphor, which is when something goes wrong, do you look in the mirror or do you look out the window? And sort of in coaching, what you want to do is, if the person tends to look out the mirror, what's the view out the window? And if they look out the window, what's the view in the mirror? And then the last part of accountability is, I was coaching one person who, I think the engagement scores in his organization, it was like 17%. But the question, I know, was how much of this is because of you, how much of this is because of your team, and how much is the organization? So also it's like accountability is sort of that shifting. So I hear that as a founder, you need to lean in and be stubborn, but you also need to be able to pull out the best in everyone. You need layers of good relationships and different languages to speak to them, and just sort of have it all kind of come together with your vision, your mission, and wanting to be a good human. Does that sort of sum up what your sense is about that?
Yes. It has to come together with the vision, the mission, being a good human, and the cash.
And the cash.
And the cash.
Okay, so we only have 2 minutes left. However, do you have any quick tips on those of us coaching founders in seed rounds? What's the best way to get cash?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, objectively speaking, the best way to be cash is to be a man.
That helps, yeah. Or
that's not very actionable, I mean, it is, I joke, but it is actually really hard to talk about fundraising independently of gender, because the statistics are just so dire. Only 2% of venture funding went to women last year.
Wow.
And it's been 2%, and it's been that way for years now. So the needle hasn't even moved, And so I think it's very different to coach women who are fundraising versus men who are fundraising. And, honestly, the most helpful thing for me trying to raise money has been to go back to some of the stuff from Marshall Goldsmith, that he wrote in his book about women leading, and to just, have the confidence that I would eventually, that I will connect with the right investor for me. And it's the thing, I think it's what, it's just the same as when you're interviewing for a job. You put your best self forward, and maybe you really want it. And you realize it's like, it has to be that, what you are is what the hiring manager needs. And there's so many factors that are beyond your control as a candidate, and you have to kind of trust the universe, I think, almost in that way. And that's been the case for me. The investors that I've connected with are incredible human beings who see my potential. They're really dedicated to unlocking it. They subscribe to the vision. And so it can be dispiriting. If you're a seasoned operator, it's also wild, to come in and to be asking for money when usually, people are putting cash in front of you and saying, how do you want to deploy it? It's a very, very different experience. And so I would just, encourage anyone who's doing it, like, not to be beleaguered and to just believe in themselves in the process, and what needs to happen will happen.
Thank you. Thank you. So it is an uphill battle for women, but if you keep increasing your probabilities, something good might happen. So Joy, thank you. This was fun talking to you, and I think you had some great lessons for our people.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Good to see you.